Good afternoon and hello, everyone. My name is Rich Longo, and welcome to another Flycast Partners webcast. Today's topic is on modern identity and access management. It looks like we have a lot of folks that are interested in this topic today because there's a lot of you on here and a lot of folks registered. So hopefully we'll be able to answer a lot of your questions today. Uh, this presentation is being put on by Flycast Partners' very own COO, John Pastorino, and one of our senior consultants, David Bryant. Now, both John and David have decades in the IT space, and a great number of those years was spent in the identity space. So they are resident experts on the topic, and I'll let them talk for themselves during the presentation today. But before we get started, let me introduce Flycast Partners. Flycast Partners offers best-in-class implementation services and training in IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, IT security, enterprise service management, and workload automation spaces using ITIL best practice. Our professional services team has almost 5,700 professional services engagements or more on both on-site and remote. And as a company, Flycast Partners has close to 1,300 regular customers throughout Canada and the United States. I encourage you to feel free to reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. Visit our website, chat live with our IT experts Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. They're standing by just for you to answer whatever the question might be, whether it be about services, whether it be about software, maybe you need a little training, or you just want to chat about what's going on in IT today. Those guys are happy to sit there and answer questions and chat with you. Or you can email us at info@flycastpartners.com. If you have questions during today's presentation, please type those in the question section of this presentation. We will get those questions answered for you live at the end of the presentation. We want to let John and David present on what they're showing us today and show us the tool, a little bit of the tool, and then we'll take your questions at the end. And hello to you, Woodrow and Jared. I have all these people reaching out to us right now saying good afternoon and hello to all of you. We want to thank you for taking time out to spend with us today. I know that each and every one of you are very busy and have a lot going on. Let me get started today by launching a poll. Let's ask you, the audience, about what is going on in your organization today. So let me ask you, how many of you have implemented an identity tool for your organization? Right now, we've got quite a few of you have answered here. How many of you have implemented an identity solution within your organization? So far, we've got a good chunk of you saying yes. We've got 65%. Almost 50% of you have voted. Keep those votes coming in, folks. We'll give it another minute or so. Give everyone an opportunity to vote. The numbers are equaling out a little bit more. So it looks like a lot more of you that are voting do not have an identity solution, it looks like. We appreciate you participating with us today and hope that you get a lot out of it and get some of your questions answered. So please make sure you type those questions in there for us. We're going to answer as many as time will allow today. Donna, hello to you. Thank you for joining us today, Donna. All right, we're almost to 70% of you having voted. We'll give it another 20 seconds. And we have most of you have voted today. So we'll go ahead and close this poll out and let's take a look at what our results are today. Our poll results are showing that 60% of you currently have an identity solution today. So very interesting results. So with that, I'm going to let John and David get right into the presentation because we have quite a bit to cover today and we'd like to get as many questions in as possible. So let's go ahead and turn that over to them. Hang on one second, John. I'm going to hand over control.
Thank you, Rich. First, I want to say thank you to everybody. We have quite a few people signed up for this event, so it seems like this has become more and more of a hot topic in IT. We are seeing that visiting customers, and as we've interacted with customers, we are finding that that identity and definitely automation are becoming more paramount to the success of organizations. And then now, obviously, with the COVID and remote workforce, there's a lot of things that we can do, and we'll go through just some of it today. But I really want to, talk about. So again, like Rich said, we're Flycast. This is kind of one of the sweet spots that we play in. Ivanti has some good products and with identity and automation, and we'll show you some of those in a moment. And one thing I do want to say too is David Bryan, who's going to do the actual demonstration, used to be the product owner for these products. And so this is kind of his, I want to say his baby, but so he has a lot of experience with this product. And hopefully, any questions that you have today between the two of us, we'll be able to answer your questions. So in doing that, I know we have a certain amount of time, and Rich is going to hold us to that. So I'd like to get right into the presentation. So really, what is identity, or what is identity access management? And I'm going to break it down in its simplest form. It's really the who, what, when, where, why. Like, who has access? Why do they have access? When do they have access? How did they get access? And it's really knowing who is accessing what within your organization. And then it's also, it also highlights provisioning, and then there's services and there's other things. But really, it comes down to the one, what we have right here on the screen is the right individuals with the right resources at the right time for the right reasons. So in identity, there is kind of a life cycle, and this is what we call baseline identity. So when you're establishing your new program within your organization, you want to talk about, the higher the moves and the levers. And so, you want to be able to automate this process. And then once you establish this baseline, this gives you a fundamental, again, base for automation and identity. And you can start taking other things, and we'll go into this in a moment, but you can start looking throughout your organization and really outside of IT. This is at the organization or the enterprise level, and look for opportunities to automate. And it could be, and we'll talk about a little bit more about this at the end, but this isn't necessarily isolated to IT. This is an enterprise initiative. This benefits the entire organization. Both from a security, from an operational, from a financial, from a consistency, from an auditing perspective. And so we're going to talk more about that, but you're going to understand as we go through this the importance that this has and the impact that this can have on your organization. But we talk about new accounts, reduce IT costs because you're standardizing, utilizing automation, and you're giving people those birthright entitlements upfront and early, so they don't have to be sitting there, for extended periods of time waiting to get access to something or waiting to have something delivered to them that would make them or allow them to be productive in their new capacity. And then you have the middle part, the move part. You're talking about that's the the life cycle of an employee. So that's taking them through but promotions, potentially demotions, change of status, so in case they go out on any kind of leave of absence, those type of things. They move to a different location. Their roles change. They don't need to be in certain security groups or distribution lists, things like that. The whole life cycle of an employee, that all goes into that middle category, and then that's all automated also. So when you move somebody from or somebody gets promoted and their job title changes, they don't need those old permissions. They need new permissions based upon their new role. Or if they move to a new location, a lot of times we have locations that have specific access requirements or application requirements based upon the location. And so that also changes if somebody moves, and that's changed within the HRS, and David will get into that in a moment. Automation picks it up and it cascades downstream to all the the subsequent applications downstream, and to include security groups and distribution lists. And then obviously you have the last one. You have the leave. And sometimes people leave because they want to, and other times people leave because they're told to. And one of the biggest problems that we have found when we go in and we look at organizations is a lot of people who have left the organization still had access. And this is something that we'll talk about shortly, but that's something that is critical to an organization to not occur. We can't allow people to have access to the internal environment of an organization if they're no longer an employee. So we'll talk about that in a moment too.
Yeah, so just to add a little bit to that, I was going to say, John, just to add a little bit to that, the identity lifecycle is a small part of identity access management. However, it is typically one of the parts that we see customers start with, and it's a very important part, and it's a good foundation. So I just wanted to, for all the people out there that have other types of identity systems like Okta, this fits in perfectly with those other IAM systems, and it's very complementary as well.
Yep. So what is the importance of identity governance? Why is this not working? That's
because I threw you off, John.
I know it's delayed. It's moving slow. But so we want to talk about, okay, so the Gartner is saying by 2021, organizations, you're going to have potentially you're going to have data breaches, and they're saying upwards of 60% data breaches. And so obviously identity and automation allow you to put stricter controls around, the propensity for people to execute a data breach, or you have a data breach external to the organization. You want to talk about, and I just spoke about this, but 24% of employees, after they've left the organization, have still had access. And then we want to talk about 50% of companies have no transition process for their workforce if roles change. So a lot of these things are manual. A lot of these things occur on a manual, they have multiple manual touch points, and that's something that we want to get away from. So you have consistency and standardization in the process within the organizations, and then you allow your workforce, especially your workforce that used to execute a lot of those manual transactions, you can redeploy those assets, and they can become proactive, vice reactive, and we'll kind of talk about that in the recap. So now I'm going to turn it over to David, and he's going to go into the actual demonstration. Go ahead, David.
Before we go into the demonstration, though, we do have a question, and this comes from Adam. Adam asks, as systems and resources change, how cumbersome is it to also update the access automation aspects?
Okay, so as things change, and are we talking about, and I'm assuming we're talking about downstream applications, but if that's the case, it's not overly difficult. It's really identifying what is the importance of the data that is required in that new application, and then bringing that data, utilizing automation, and bringing that data over to that new application to allow, and I want to say access or whatever is required on the downstream application. So it's not overly difficult. It's just really what are the requirements downstream. And one of the things that we always look at, and there's specific attributes that we normally key on when we do identity automation, and it's usually title and location. Those are two of the critical variables that we focus on because those have the largest impact in organizations. A lot of times that's what dictates what happens downstream within an organization. And I hope I answer your question.
And if you need some further information, Adam, by all means, type that in there and we'll get the answers for you.
Go ahead, David.
Great. Perfect. Yep. So I'm going to show you and walk you through the life cycle of an employee. So one of the first places we usually start is with an HR system. So this is not a product that we're interested in. This is something that you typically already have. This could be UltiPro. This could be whatever. This is Orange HRM in our environment. And typically this is going to be at least one system, if not more. So typically we see our customers have a system for employees, a system for vendors, contractors, and then as we do a lot of work in healthcare as well, we also see one for practitioners and students and things like that. So we can combine all that information, but for this demo, we're just going to show you from more of an employee system. Now, we're not trying to actually change what HR is doing. We're just going to make it the source of truth. They own that data. So in this case, I'm going to onboard John Pastorino here. And this is something HR would typically do. They'd add some contact details, some job details. And right now, I'm just adding in the stuff that we care about. So in this case, John will be an IT analyst, corporate office, he's in IT.
And while David,
we'll give him the location in Chicago.
One thing
Go
I
ahead.
do want to say too is you don't have to necessarily write to and from directly to the HRS. You can put it into, we have customers that want to set it up on an SFTP server, and then it's swept up, periodically, so the changes. So you're not writing directly to the HRIS system. And it just really depends upon, your comfort level regarding the information going back and forth. And then what are really the rules internal to your organization on going to the, let's call it the gold source of information. So, I mean, there's many different ways that it can be done. And the way David's doing it right now, we're doing a direct integration.
Correct. Yep. And now I actually switched over to the Identity Director and Management Portal. So this is something that IT would see. And now what it's doing, like John said, is it's periodically checking that source or those sources for any changes. Those changes can be new additions. It can be changes to things like phone numbers, titles, departments, all of that stuff, or it can be marked for deletion, any of that. So you'll notice here that I actually saw a new person. So let's see what that looks like when I'm pulling the information in. So I'm pulling in a name, an identifier. In that case, it was their employee number. I'm pulling in stuff like first name, last name, employee number, phone number, and also things like where do they work, what's their category, what's their job title. So I'm building up some information about that person. Now you will notice that things I don't have in here, I don't have information about other systems because they haven't been provisioned yet. So if I go take a look here, you can see that I've already started to deliver some entitlements, and one of the base ones that we're using in this instance is a Windows user account. So this has workflow in it that will take information that we gathered from the HRIS system. It will then talk to Active Directory. That could be, Azure AD. That could be another directory system. That could be Active Directory. It's going to then build up that account based off of your business policies and procedures. And once that's done, we can now deliver more stuff. So you can see all of these things are happening with, different, based on different steps and having ones completed in the beginning. And you can also see some of these are going to be delivered based on role as well. So in this case, Autodesk is going to be something that we're delivering to the IT analyst, but we wouldn't normally deliver something like that to, let's say, a salesperson. So all of this is happening. We can see the status of each one. We can also click into any of these and get the workflow steps as well. So in a visual step, I see that, okay, this is everything I'm going to do to just create that Windows account. And it's showing you all the steps it took. So if it didn't go down a path, it's not highlighted. Here's the quick view of it. You can click in as well to see parameters that are being passed. So in this case, I'm passing in, first name, last name, what I want the username to be, which could be changed, all of that good stuff. So now if I go back to John, and I take a look at this, I see now that I have more information. I have information about an email address because I've provisioned one for him. I see information about the Windows user account because that's provisioned. And what this really allows you to do is tie all these systems together. So systems that before, if you really weren't sure, because they had different usernames and passwords, now you have all that information in a central location. It makes auditing easy. It makes tracking how they got that from who, what, when, where, and why, and how. Just like John said, it makes that easy as well. I can also go in and see a detailed view of the user and see, okay, what did we actually deliver? So we've delivered 17 different items here, different entitlements, even though they have access to 65 of them. So that means that we also have a self-service component, which you can use later on, because some things might be able to be used, but they might be cost prohibitive to assign them to every user. So we also have that capability as well.
Hey, David. I just want to say something. So one of the things that David just talked about, that additional services or additional things that can be provided to your end users, and if it could be something, let's just say something that's financial impacting or budget impacting. For instance, somebody requests Visio, which we all know is kind of expensive. Not everybody needs it. This can you can set up a workflow and a service within Identity that can go to and set up, and it goes to the procurement person and it goes to the end user's manager for approval. because it's revenue or budget impacting. So you can set those types of workflows up within this software to make sure that, you know, people just don't arbitrarily get assigned some kind of access to an application. It has to go through an approval process and I would say different levels of approval process because of the importance and the impact that that has on the organization.
Thanks, John. Yep. Now there's the other part of this, as we were talking about, is that user portal. So I'm going to log into this as the manager of that new user, and I can see I have some things in my queue. So one of the things that we need to do for our new employee, John, is we need to decide, does he need hardware? If so, what does he need? Well, based on, you know, his position here, he's going to get, you know, these different items. We're going to send this information, and we're going to finish that. So now what we're actually going to do is talk to ISM, in this case, Ivanti Service Manager, and log that information with an approval. So that's part of the onboarding process. So part of that process is, if I go into the system here, I can see that I'm recording things. Here's the new employee onboarding, which we've already closed because there was no issue. So we're tracking it, we're logging it. If there was issues, we could leave it open and have an analyst, a service desk analyst, go and take a look and see what failed and see if we can fix it. So we can actually track all this stuff as well. In a little bit, I should also see the request for the asset request, which is right here as well, and that's active because it's really hard to directly provision via automation hardware resources. So of course, that's why we left that open for the service desk as well. But that'll have all the information on all of the things that we've asked for as part of that onboarding request. So we can see all that here. Any questions on that part? All right, we'll pause there. Rich, anything?
No questions at this time. We're good.
Okay, perfect. So one of the other parts that we talked about, a lot of companies already have some sort of onboarding process in place, which is great. It's a great starting point. But then when you get into the moves, that's when a lot of times things are lacking. So let me change this in our HR system. So in this case, we're going to go from an IT analyst to, let's say, marketing communications. So they're now in the marketing field. Marketing communications, we'll save that. We'll also change the employer or the manager here. And we will delete that one. And so it's the same procedure as before, right? So we're actually going in. This is the management portal. It's running a sync with the HR system to track any changes. And now, based on all of your business processes and procedures, you're going to remove stuff that is no longer needed and add things that are now needed for that new job. And this can be, you know, you can have overlap if you want. You can have approvals. You can have all of that good stuff that you can do as long as your procedures are written down and correct. Now, this is actually one of the places where we see a lot of companies are missing this information because they're very good at provisioning but not deprovisioning, and that's the squeaky wheel, right? So if somebody has switched jobs and they don't have access to their new applications, they don't have access to the new shares, the data, all of that stuff, they're going to complain to their manager because they can't do their job. However, if you forget to take away, you know, Visio or some other application that they no longer need, they're not going to necessarily complain, right? Whoever complains that they have too much access, they always complain that they don't have enough. So this is where we're going through and changing all this information. So here's an example. We returned Autodesk from John, and we've added some other stuff as well, like we've delivered Acrobat, Illustrator, LinkedIn, and the marketing department share. So this is a way to make sure that, you know, if a user no longer needs it, we return it. If they do need it, we deliver it. And this will happen for any of the entitlements that we've given, whether they are automatically generated birthright entitlements or if they are requested entitlements. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on that?
We do have a question. All right. And let's, are there any possible issues when managing this across multiple business units or physical locations that may require slight adjustments? Or do you just create the access files as needed?
Right. So yeah, there's not a problem if it's across multiple business units or geographies. The biggest issues that we see are typically process and procedures issues, in which case they're not well defined. And what that means is typically during an engagement, what we'll do is we'll sit down with all of these different business units, different departments, and ask them a bunch of questions to see how well defined everything is and to see what we need to do in order to improve on that process. But yeah, the tool will handle all of that stuff, as long as it's set up to follow those business policies and procedures. And that's because we have a system of variables and we can insert metadata into a lot of these procedures so that you can take a standard automation task and you can add in the right information at the right time.
One thing I would like to add also to that is that when you implement an identity and automation solution within an organization, a lot of it is based upon communication and organizational change, and allowing the organization or I'm going to say teaching the organization the importance of, okay, if you own the data, let's just say HR, if HR owns the data and they change a variable in the HRIS, what's going to happen downstream? Like how is automation going to take that and execute, access or add people or remove people, whatever it's going to be on the execution of services. But a lot of that is organizational change and really organizational intelligence. And as David said, it's having and teaching the owner of the data, the importance of what they're responsible for. And a lot of that time, it's just an education process. And we start that, as David said, when we go in and we start establishing, kind of, let's say, the rules or the requirements, we ask literally hundreds and hundreds of questions, and we do desk audits, and we do process audits. We actually map out new processes, and we sit there and we go through this with the stakeholders to make sure everybody's understanding. And then obviously all this goes into one document and then it's published. We all agree on it. But at the end of the day, it's understanding that downstream impact when you change something that before could have been 10 different manual processes. Now it's one, and it executes. So that's another big part of and it's not the software, the hardware. Again, it goes back to organizational change and process change.
Yep, exactly. Now, one of the parts I haven't shown you yet as well is I'll go over to my user portal here. So this is where I showed you that the manager or somebody can interact with questions, do approvals, do all of their stuff. They can also request software. So this is all for that specific person. But if you are a manager, there is a little manager panel, which you can have different ones depending on role. So it could be an application owner, it could be a direct supervisor. And you can see, in this case, it's a direct supervisor. I can see all the people that I manage. Now, this is pretty cool because you can also, if you click on a person, you can see some of the entitlements that they have, like, for example, Concur. And if I decided that that was no longer relevant for my manager, or if I'm an application owner and I saw that it's not relevant for a specific person, I can actually remove that as well. So what that helps you do from an identity standpoint is it also helps with doing ad hoc attestations. So you don't necessarily have to wait, and you can have your managers and your application owners being proactive in that case.
All right, Dave and John, we
in
have another
addition,
question. Oh.
Sure.
Yep. It's coming from Jesse. Jesse says, if we are a small IT shop what is the real life expectancy that we can manage a tool like this on top of UEM, ISM, neurons? At what point is this a good buy versus adding work? It seems like there's a natural tipping point. That's a good question.
I think from our perspective, we would have to know more about your current workload and environment. And when we talk about identity and automation, and I don't know how big your shop is or your organization, but we normally look at organizations that are 500 end users and above, because sometimes you're right, it's not cost efficient or labor efficient to implement a solution like this at a much smaller organization, mostly because you don't have as many moving parts or it's not as critical to your success. So we have to come in and we have to look at the organization, we look at your workload, we look at all the integration. But I will say this, the caretaking of the application of identity and automation, you do have to learn it. You have to learn how to build the workflows. You have to learn how the jobs are run and those type of things. But it can reduce your upfront workload exponentially. It can reduce your ticket count. It can reduce your service desk requirements exponentially. There's a lot of different things that you have to look at. I would say the pros and cons. Like any software, you have to do the due diligence on your part to sit and and do the organizational evaluation on, does this make sense? And we don't come in and necessarily just say you have to have identity and automation, because sometimes we come in and we say it doesn't fit. And so really it's a case by case basis. And I know that's a very general answer. That's a very I want to say consultant answer. But it truly is the answer that is something that we deal with every day. And we talk to customers about, does it fit? And then what are you trying to achieve? Like, what is your business case? And then we kind of go through that. And when we start asking the questions and we go through the evaluation process, sometimes it does come out on the other end and it's just not a good fit. But we would talk you through that and we would go through that process with you just to make sure. And we're not going to sell you something for the sake of selling it. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't work, and it doesn't benefit your organization, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, and in addition as well, it also depends on the type of organization. So, I know John says 500 seats and above. However, if there's a lot of turnover, if it's, a teaching hospital type of setting, if it's retail, if it's one of those where there's a lot of turnover, then you're going to see more bang from the buck, because you're going to have more tickets for onboarding, for moves, for offboarding than you would, a company that doesn't have that big turnover. In addition to it, might make more sense if it's a smaller organization and there is, a high security risk or high security compliance where you need to make sure that you can provide the auditors the information they need right away, and to prove that when this person changed jobs, they no longer had access to information where they shouldn't. And so those are two additional use cases where it might make sense in a smaller organization. In addition to that, you did mention, things like UEM, endpoint, ISM. One of the benefits of identity and the automation engine behind it is that it can help to integrate all of those systems together. So you no longer need a person to actually go through and push buttons on certain things. So for instance, if you have a new user, you can have identity talk to ISM to have the user, set up some software, but then when the user logs in and they realize they need these additional 7 other applications, they can go ask in a nice format, whether that's ISM or whether that's through the user portal, to have those applications installed. And then you can also reach out to EPM, for example, and tell EPM to go install it in on these devices, if it's approved. So it's a way to also integrate systems together and have them communicate better, so that you have a better layer of visibility and you need less human touch point. So anything to add on that, John, as well, or?
No, I think that's and exactly what David said. I did miss that point when I spoke earlier, is that if your organization is highly regulated, and we're highly regulated from a accessibility standpoint, again, go back to the who, what, when, where, why, there is a fit for this, and it does make sense. And we do a lot of this in, say, like the financial vertical, because of the regulations associated with the financial community or again, industry. So really, again, it comes down to your organization. We look at it and we say, okay, is this a good fit for you? And then we go through that process. But no, David, I think you nailed it.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, in addition to, so getting back to some of the other stuff that provides visibility, you can also see, for example, some of the groups and some of the departments and other information that I have on that user. So in addition to just returning, as a manager, I can also deliver. So I could go through and request something and say, okay, I need these 2 items. And I can go request it on behalf of that user as well. So if I'm a manager and application owner, this is also a good way to manage the users of both direct reports and application usage. All right. So then, finally going through and taking a look, right, what happens when a user is offboarded? So if I go into my job and I say I want to terminate the user, and we'll say John is now laid off. Again, we're going to go through, HR is going to do their thing, and they might set a termination date in there, in which case, we'll take that into account, into perspective. And we will go, and now we will start that search and see, do we need to make changes? In this case, John has been terminated, so what we'll do is we will remove all of the entitlements that John has had, and we'll undo all that stuff. And if we need to, we'll log some stuff with ISM, with asset, to say you need to go, claim these assets. We can send out communications to different departments, including, if there's a SecOps department, so that they can make sure that, over the last 30 days, there was no abnormal data transfers for this user. So you can really notify and be proactive about people changing jobs and people leaving, to make sure that you are securing access to data and you are removing applications and not providing the ability for an employee to access stuff that they shouldn't when they leave.
Another good business case for this type of technology is your contractor workforce. So we deal a lot with organizations that have a heavy contractor footprint, and we all know that most of the time contractors are governed by a spreadsheet. And again, it's the coming and going. It's how do they get access? Who approves their access? Who sponsors them? So we go through that process too, and you can utilize automation. And automation, it could be as easy as a ticket in ISM that goes into identity and automation, or you can start it, as David said earlier, in the portal for identity, or the I guess the service portal for identity. But what can happen is, you can set up time limitations for your contract. It can be 60, 90 days, whatever your business says, or delineates, and then that's going to be the rules of engagement for a contractor workforce. So when that contractor is about to run out at their 90-day mark, an automatic, utilizing automation, is sent to the manager for approval or disapproval. If there's no answer, that contractor loses access on that as soon as that time frame ends. So at that 90-day mark in this case. So, but one of the things, and this is one of the big things that we definitely see with most organizations, is contractor workforce is a pain point. And then how do they control it? And you can control it utilizing automation the same way that you can control a permanent employee.
All right, here's a question that's very important in regards to what you just said. Michael wants to know reporting. Can the system generate annual or quarterly reports showing who has access?
Yep, so identity does tie in with extraction. So you can use extraction to create those reports. It's also got, its own information in the back end. You can query it with APIs. So if that information isn't in extraction, definitely we can help create custom reports if needed. But yeah, you can use extraction. You can tie it into other systems as well. And automation, which we haven't actually shown the console for that, but that also has a tie into extraction as well. So you can see what was supposed to happen with identity, what happened, with automation to verify it. You can then tie it into things like Active Directory and say, yep, I see the entire account was removed. So you can actually use extraction in addition to all of the other parts of it to show a chain of events from why did it happen, who was it supposed to happen to, was there approvals, okay, it was done, and now the end result. And with extraction, you can also have that generate, reports daily, weekly, monthly, annually, whatever you want. Does that answer the question?
Let us know, Michael, if that answered your question.
And it looks like we have.
Thank you and yes.
Okay, perfect. It also looks like Matt from Ivanti said that in the second half of 2020, they are doing some additions and some enhancements to access reviews into Identity Director. So that will help as well. In addition to the ad hoc panels, it looks like you'll also have some pre-built or some easy access to access reviews. So thanks for that, Matt. Okay, John, anything I forgot to show in this section here?
No, I think you're good, David.
All right. Pass you back the ball.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, and I know this is obviously a very condensed demonstration. We only had a limited amount of time to kind of walk through this and obviously answer questions. But really, one of the things from an operational standpoint, now let's just separate from the IT side and talk about operational impact. When we look at and we talk to leadership, or we are part of leadership, we always have to look at the bottom line. We have to look at opportunities, obviously, to save costs or to increase revenue. So you have to. It's a continuous process within the organization. So and this is something else that we talk about when we come on site. We start doing. We start looking at identity, potentially bringing an identity solution to you as a customer, is we sit and we talk to many different stakeholders. So we talk to the finance department, we talk to the HR department, we talk to operations, security, service desk, IT, obviously. And we go through all these different things to show, again, the organizational value of this specific application or these two, applications, because it's more than just IT. And what you're doing then is you're putting the responsibility onto the HR people for personnel data instead of IT and worrying about IT and IT having a role in it. Really, at the end of the day, IT is an executor. So we look at that, and again, we talk through that. So this slide here, we talk about focus area comparison, and you're just saying, okay, focus area, time, standards, documentation, human error, audit. Just basic things, but they're so important to the everyday success of an organization. And then you look at the traditional, time, long. It takes a long time to do things, especially manually. Well, from automation, it's extremely short. You can onboard somebody immediately. You can bring somebody back from a leave of absence, employment status immediately, as long as somebody was able to look at the documentation and bring them back. You can set up services for HR where HR can do an emergency termination. You can limit that based upon, who has responsibility to touch that button or execute that service. It could be a director above or a VP or above, or it could be one person. It doesn't matter to us. But you can sit there and set up things like that. But what you're doing is you're capitalizing on the amount of time that you have in a workday. And you're going to be able to do more with less because of this technology. Standards. A lot of times we talk about standards. We talk about desktop procedures. We talk about processes. And from what we see, when we go into most organizations, is it's not been documented. Or we did a workflow document, 5 years ago. We need to bring that back out. Well, what this is doing then is this is taking and it's making things relevant and it's making them consistent. So having a consistent output and a way to look at the transaction and the historical information based upon identity and based upon, if you say you tie into ISM or something, and you could have two sources of truth and you're going to have consistency. It's going to be the same thing done the same way each and every time. So we talked about,
and to expand on that.
Yes,
I was going to say, to expand on that as well, we've also had many, customers where this is one of the reasons why they brought in Identity Director, is because, they've had over the past 3-4 years, they've had a lot of growth, And you could see in their onboarding process that it was general and it depended on who did what, which service desk employee did what, or which IT analyst did what, depended on how that person was onboarded, what they actually got, what their user accounts look like. And so what that really made was the audit team, it made that process very difficult. And, that was one of the main reasons why they brought it in was standardization. They wanted everything to be the same moving forward. They wanted to take out that lack of consistency, and they wanted the business policies and procedures that they developed to actually be followed. And this was an easy way for them to do that.
Exactly. And then we talk about human error. Right now you're thinking, okay, exactly what David said. Each transaction or each thing that's executed takes on the flavor of the person executing it in a manual environment, in a traditional environment. So you want to look at it again. It could be 10 different people attempting to do the same thing, but they're going to do it 10 different ways. And so what we want to do is you take out that human error, you remove that human error as much as possible. So when we map out those processes, we look for manual touch points. And then we sit there and we try to capitalize, we try to review the process and look where you can insert identity and automation to alleviate any kind of human touch points. So we try to minimize that as much as possible, or we try to eliminate it altogether. And like we said earlier, so the people that were executing those tasks or their services prior to identity and automation can now be redeployed in a more effective manner. What we say, you become proactive instead of continually being reactive. And we could talk about, we could bore you to death with many case studies and many really success stories, but obviously time's limited. Auditing. And for larger organizations or organizations that are heavily regulated, you normally have internal and external auditors. And you guys know auditing is a pain in the backside. So what we do is we're able to show the auditors in an efficient, immediate manner why something happened. Looking at those logs, looking at the historical logs of why a transaction happened, how we can drill down to the person. So when an auditor comes and they say what used to be, hey, why did this happen on this day why did this person do this or get this? Now you can look at it, you can say, okay, I can, from an automation standpoint, you can just show them immediately why something occurred. And then it takes out the guessing. And what I've seen many times is from an auditing perspective, what used to take weeks and be very labor intensive and very manual now takes, and I would say minutes, because you can show them almost immediately. And then what happens too is you establish a sense of comfort with those auditors because you're giving them the efficient, expedient, right answer each and every time.
And I'd like to squeeze in a question from Sean. This is real quick. Sean wants to know, so HR will not need to work into the system. They can work in their system, and identity will pick up this change and execute automation.
Yes.
That is correct. Yep.
Yeah, so again, like I talked about when we first started, you key on specific variables, things that are important to you as the organization. Like I said, a lot of times it's going to be people, it's going to be title and location. So we key on specific variables. So when HR makes a change in the HRIS, we execute a cycle, and then anything that was changed within that cycle of the information we bring in from the HRIS is going to dictate what's going to happen downstream. And that's all going to be based upon the functionality and services that are created in identity and automation. So organizational impact. This is the last slide. We want to talk about the certain things, and this goes back to, again, what I wanted to say earlier about, or I have said earlier about, it touches the entire organization. And what you want to establish, what we have established when you start talking about automation and people see the beauty of identity and automation, of an identity governance solution or identity access management solution, is it becomes more of a pull. And when I say that is, in traditional organizations, IT is usually a push. IT usually has a push mentality. It's like, okay, you're going to get this on this day for this reason, or you're going to wait, and this is why. Well, you change that. You change that whole mindset, and again, it goes back to organizational change, because now it becomes pull. People can do things when they want to do them, when they need to do them, or people. And when I say, I'm sorry, not people, in departments, they're going to start wanting to automate more of their processes. So again, it's not just an IT function. It becomes an organizational function. So we look at cybersecurity, and we know this, and from cybersecurity people who are on this call or on this webinar, you always want to know the who, what, when, where, why, and how. Those are, in the most basic form, those are the most important things that we have to know on a daily basis about the people and the end users within our environment and what they're doing and how they're doing it, where they're doing it, why they're doing it. We want to talk about reduction to cybersecurity insurance programs. If you establish and I won't even say mature, but if you establish an identity access management program within your organization, your cybersecurity premiums will be less. And it's less because your maturity level within your organization and the reduction and removal of manual touch points, that's going to allow you to save money. And I know this is kind of, the second tier effect of identity and automation, but it's something that you have to consider because, again, it comes back to an organizational solution and organizational impact. As David said earlier, you want to talk about endpoint protection, you can utilize automation. Automation can go out when and where and why, and it could sit there and it could patch something, it could update something based upon your needs and wants and the services that you create. The business units, the push mentality goes away. It becomes a pull model. I want to pull. I want to pull when I want to pull. And it could be things like, and we've done this with, OS upgrades, things like that, tying into, some kind of, what is it called? Anyway, but OS upgrades, when you tie in and you can execute a specific way and you have your task sequence set up and things that can be established, but you're utilizing automation, persona information, you're utilizing automation, you're utilizing identity. So there's certain things that can happen within your environment that couldn't be done before utilizing the tools that you had when you had them. You establish a gold source of information, and it could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be just HR information. It could also be operational information. It could be location information. It doesn't matter to us. It doesn't matter to identity and automation. It's just what's important to you as an organization. What is the most critical things within your organization that you can key on to make, to execute and give people the right access at the right time? What do you got, Dave?
Another good example of a gold source that's outside of HR is projects. So if you have different business units or working on different projects and need access to different shares and different resources for that, you can have a project database. So when somebody moves from one project to another, their access will be returned and then the new access will be given. So that eliminates some of the contention between those two projects as well, because you're not going to have access to more data than you need.
Then the next point, and we've already talked about this a little bit, but we do see that this is a very critical element in most of the organizations that we talk to regarding identity and automation. It's contractor accountability. Again, it's how do you bring them on? How do you request them? Who owns them? Not when I say owns them, who's responsible for their welfare while they're part of the organization? What's the duration? What's their access? How do you treat them like you would treat an FTE and make it where it's not a manual process? It's not a spreadsheet process. So this is something that, and again, we can go into a lot of detail about that, but this is one of the huge pain points that we see across many different organizations. Service desk ticket reduction. Once you establish your baseline, and we talk about baseline again as we started, you're talking about onboarding, offboarding, and then really the change of status. But once you establish that, what we like to execute is we like to look at ticket analysis or ticket evaluation. We look at tickets. What's your big pain point? We've had customers that have had, let's just say, password resets. Big retail company, password resets were a huge problem. They had 21,000 tickets on a monthly basis. We automated the password reset. It took them down to 11,000 tickets on a monthly basis. And then we kept chipping away from there. We did other things, POS access. Okay, great. You reduce your ticket count. And again, when you reduce your ticket count, you can make people, your current workforce, redeployed, or you can make it more proactive than reactive. What can we do for you is the way we always look at it. Standardization of processes. We've talked about this multiple times. You have consistency. You have consistency with the output. You're going to have the same output each and every time. And then simplify internal, external audits. I just talked about that in the previous slide, how easy it is and how you gain that confidence you instill a sense of confidence into those auditors where they become comfortable and you can show them who has access to the system, why a transaction occurred, when it occurred, how it occurred, those type of things. So you can see that really, and then, I am somewhat biased regarding identity and automation, but the sky's the limit. As creative as you want to be with the technology, and again, what the question somebody asked earlier about the tipping point, you find that tipping point, the internal tipping point, when you have automated what you need to automate and has the most impact on the organization. And that's really the key behind it all. It's like sitting down and identifying what your needs and wants are, and then sitting with us, and we go through and we start asking questions and we talk through potential solutions. But at the end of the day, that's the kind of impact that identity and automation can have within an organization.
And John, it looked like Matt has an additional thought he's typed in there for you under the panelist section.
So Matt put in there about furloughed employees can also be an interesting scenario in this case, where you don't necessarily offboard the user, but you'll just put that user on hold, and that's something that is definitely possible in this scenario. It would be just like a leave of absence, except it might be a different status in an HR system, but I could see it being quite similar to a leave of absence type of state. So yeah, that's definitely something that is relevant in these uncertain times, right?
So that's, from our perspective, I mean, that's what we came here to present today on identity and automation. And you can see, really one of the biggest things, and I know it's for some people, it's just words on a screen, but we simplify information technology. And it's really taking technology, making it more relevant to the organization, and having the most impact on an organization for the best price for the organization. So that's the intent behind this. And again, it doesn't fit everybody, but there is a lot of usefulness for this identity and automation and the things that we talked about in most organizations. And that's really the extent of our presentation today. I really want to thank everybody for, first of all, giving us this opportunity. You can hear it in our voices, the passion that we have for this technology, but really it's the impact that it could potentially have on your organization, to lighten your load, reduce some of the bureaucracy, a lot of different things that we deal with on a daily basis. But this could really help, and it does help a lot of customers. So if you want to talk more about it, please don't hesitate to reach out to Rich, and Rich can obviously give us your contact information, and we can give you a call and talk through it. But Rich, that's all we have. Thank you very much. It's truly appreciated.
So John, we definitely have one more poll that we need to do here, and I want to go ahead and get that up on the screen real quick. And during this poll, let's go ahead and there's a couple more questions I want to squeeze in because we really wanted to get this poll in today. So I'm going to launch this poll, and while this poll is going, the last couple questions that I promised I would ask, one of them is, let's go back up here. Are there ways to tweak some of the processes to customize for our own business processes a little more? Can that be done by the admins?
Yes, it can. And so that's, you can really, one of the beauties behind identity and automation is it's customized to you and your organization, your processes and your workflows. So when you establish workflows within your organization, you're going to document them, obviously, and then you're going to build the workflow in accordance with what you're trying to achieve. So it can be, the sky's the limit. I mean, we've had some organizations that will run, one service when they run a workflow. We've had other organizations that have run, 60 plus services when they run a workflow. So really the sky's the limit. And yes, it can be done internally by your internal admins. They just need to obviously know, when going through the implementation cycle, they just need to go and sit down with our consultants to just understand the inner workings and the functionality of the application.
All right, next quick question. I want to get through these real fast. Can this interface with Central Square One Solution and also ExecuTime?
So without really knowing a lot about those two applications, I would say in most cases, yes. As long as there's an opportunity to interface or integrate, an API or any other way or mechanism that's in place or available from those applications, they can be integrated into. And so what normally happens then, we integrate into those applications. We run the workbook, again, a workflow, a workbook. We integrate in those applications and we provision and deprovision people based upon, again, the approval process of the organization. So, and I would have to do a little bit more research on those two specific applications, but I'm assuming that is and again, I just, with just a little knowledge of what they do, I'm assuming that they can be integrated into, yes.
And final question, and then that's it. In general, how does the cost for the system compare to something like Workday? I'm not sure that you can even answer that because that just depends on each individual situation, but I'll let you go for it.
So Workday's an HRIS system. So Workday's a little bit different than identity and automation. Usually we integrate into Workday. Workday, and I will tell you, Workday's very expensive. So it's almost like comparing apples to oranges. Now, if you were going to compare identity and automation, say to One Identity or SailPoint or something like that, this product here, Identity and Automation, Ivanti Identity and Automation, is normally less expensive to implement and it's quicker to implement. And again, it's all dependent upon the organization and the needs and wants of the organization. So, but to compare it to Workday is really not comparing an identity solution to an identity solution. That's an HRIS system to an identity solution.
And so most of our folks have gone ahead and voted on our poll today. So I'm sharing the poll with you guys today. It looks like the majority of you do feel that this is very important. These are some very high numbers. So 60% of you said it's very important, and we had a large audience. 37% somewhat important, and only 3% of you said it's not very important. So definitely, if you're interested in this at all or have additional questions, reach out to us. Give us a call at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, go ahead and chat with us live Monday through Friday on our website from 8:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., or you can email us at info@flycastpartners.com. With that being said, I'm going to thank both David and John for their time today, and all of you, because I know how busy everyone is. We have definitely run over time. I apologize for that today, folks, but there was a lot of material to cram in there. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Rich.
Have a great one, folks. Until our next presentation, have a safe one out there.